Out of all the mysteries within Undertale, Dr. W.D. Gaster has captivated the fandom the most over the past 6 years. It's easy to see why, as we're introduced to just enough information to get our gears turning, but left with a blank canvas from which fans can form many theories and interpretations. However, because he's such a hot topic in the fandom, with so many popular fanworks, the fanon has blurred with the canon, overshadowing the original content and sometimes contradicting it. Many aspects of Gaster's fan lore are treated as fact, when in truth several of those aspects do not exist in the original game. While this doesn't mean these works are bad, it leads to a fandom Mandela effect, and Toby's original vision may be lost. So in this video I'd like to pick into several popular fan concepts, explore their origins, and draw the line between fanon and canon. If you want a more comprehensive overview in both Undertale and Deltarune, check out Misty Sparkle's video. I will link it in the description. However, for our purposes, I'm going to focus largely on Undertale itself, with perhaps a few brief notes about Deltarune where relevant. The Void. The Void is a fanon concept with no explicit basis in Undertale. It's often assumed that Gaster was lost in the void, but if you look deep in the Undertale text dump, the word void only comes up once in a metaphorical sense from Metaton. Not once is the idea of some grand void introduced, at least not explicitly. When you call Undyne in the dump, she mentions Alphys once looked out into the abyss beyond the trash. But this is less a supernatural void, and rather shows her desperate state of mind, given the dark implications of her actions. There is the dark space surrounding Photoshop Flowey before the neutral finale, as well as the empty abyss after you complete a No Mercy run, but both of these have no direct connection to Gaster. At most, they deal with the world of the game being drastically altered, if not destroyed. It certainly exceeds beyond the framework of the game itself, but that's all we know for sure. It's most likely this trapped in the void concept originated from the Mysteryman room existing outside of the normal space of Undertale's world, with Mysteryman being Gaster trapped within. The redacted NPC may also factor into this, existing in a black void of a test room. There is also the black screen where the entry number 17 text appears. But even then, these aren't concretely mentioned as being the void, and there's a problem with Gaster being a singular entity. So, to that, let's look at the Gaster followers and what they say. The Gaster followers are the only definitive lore we have on Undertale Gaster. These rare fun events have only a slim chance of occurring in-game, and an even slimmer chance of being encountered with their corresponding fun values. However, data miners have long since discovered their existence, thus they were our first clue to Gaster's existence. These guys confirm the following. Gaster created the core. Gaster was an impressive scientist, but met a tragic end as he fell into his own creation. The creation is not specified. Gaster is listening, even now. Asgore took a very long time to replace him. Gaster was shattered across time and space and exists in pieces, some of which have taken hold of other monsters. Because Gaster is in pieces, he cannot exist in a singular void. Gaster shattered, and at least one of the Gaster followers holds a piece of him. This runs contrary to Gaster being trapped as just one person, and while some might cite the Deltarune Gonermaker as proof of him being trapped somewhere beyond our comprehension, one could just as easily assume that Gaster is simply an ascended presence now that can look beyond the fourth wall. See also the Undertale Twitter takeovers. In addition to this, Gaster is not confirmed forgotten. Many fans speculate that when Gaster was shattered across time and space, he was scrubbed from everyone's memories. This interpretation has a few likely origins. First, there's the initial idea that Gaster was dummied out content, as when Undertale first released, almost all of the corresponding fun events did not function due to a typo in the game's code. Fun capitalized versus fun lowercase. This was later updated with a patch, however, and now the events are accessible through normal play. There's also Goner Kid, who describes a world where you don't exist, yet everything functions fine. While I can see why people assume this applies to Gaster, it's still worth noting that Goner never mentions memory outright, but rather an existential dilemma. It is possible to read into this, especially doubled with the fact that when you enter Gaster's name into the name select screen, the game restarts. And yet, if we return to the Gaster followers, they never mention memories, or erasure necessarily. In fact, they specifically mention how Asgore took a long time to replace Gaster, which suggests that he wasn't completely scrubbed from memory. As for why Gaster is never brought up in the main game, doing so would have pulled the focus away from Alphys and her struggles, and make her position as scientist in the main story carry less gravitas. Just look at how the fandom's treated her. Think of it this way. Toriel is the queen, yet most NPCs don't talk about her outside the ruins until the epilogue. Asriel isn't mentioned at all until New Home, other than small hints like the dump flashback. What about the don't forget drawing in Sans' lab? For the longest time, people assumed this drawing was Sans, Gaster, and either Alphys or Papyrus. However, keep in mind that this only unlocks after you interact with Clam Girl. And Clam Girl mentions a Susie, and in the Switch version, states that the time of meeting Susie is fast approaching. This is important context, since the Switch version of Undertale released a few weeks before Deltarune, and in Deltarune, we meet Susie, albeit with a different spelling, a trio of 3 heroes, and the game's theme song, Don't Forget. Basically, this drawing might be related to Deltarune, and has its own interesting implications about Sans that I may cover in a future video. Furthermore, the Gonerkid dialogue is very loose in how you can interpret it. For instance, it could be commentary on how the fun events do not have meaningful impact on the main story. In a run without the event, everything functions perfectly without them. This still does apply to Gaster, in the fact that the average player will not encounter his followers in normal gameplay or learn about him outside of fan content. But ultimately, his erasure from memory is simply one popular take and not definitive. Speaking of popular takes, Mysteryman and Gaster. As mentioned, many people assume Mysteryman is Gaster. However, it's not without reason. For instance, his fun value is 66, and Gaster has many connections to the number 6. For instance, his in-game stat values are all consisting of 6s. Additionally, when interacting with Mysteryman, he makes the following sound. Only 2 other NPCs make this noise, one of the Gaster followers, and Goner Clamgirl. The sound in question? When you slow it down and reverse it, it actually contains the Gaster leitmotif, which you can hear here. So, if nothing else, we can connect the Mysteryman to Gaster in a loose sense. Perhaps he's merely another fragment, like the one that merged with the follower's hand. However, due to Gaster's shattering, it's very unlikely that Mysteryman is the sole physical form of Gaster, as such a form likely no longer exists in Undertale's world. It's also worth noting that the official tarot cards replaced Gaster in the Hierophant Arcana and used Gerson instead. If nothing else, this means Toby does not wish to confirm Gaster's appearance one way or the other, at least not yet. But what about Redacted? Redacted could be another fragment, but it is worth noting that this room is blocked by dog check and cannot be accessed without additional modding tools or hex editing. While the assets and code still exist, the fact that dog check blocks it makes the whole Redacted scenario a bizarre outlier. It might not be worth treating it as definitive given how heavily removed it is compared to the fun events. That said, Mysteryman's appearance does lead into another popular interpretation of Gaster, that he is a skeleton. Skeleton and Sans. You may wonder where the Gaster skeleton headcanon came from. Disregarding Mysteryman's vague skeletal appearance, there are a few other things of note. The hidden entry number 17 room contains a cryptic message left by Gaster that I'm sure most people know by now. Darker yet darker, shadows cutting deeper, all that good stuff. However, the distinct trait of this room is the text in capital Wingdings font, which has led to the belief that the WD in Gaster's name is Wingdings. The font matters because the only 2 characters who are shown to speak in a non-standard font are Sans and Papyrus, both skeletons. This precedent is further emphasized by Sans' battle, and specifically the Gaster blasters he uses. This, in turn, connects Sans to Gaster, at least in some vague sense. Much of Sans' story remains a mystery, so it's hard to say what sort of connection it was, but it's clear that Sans had a history with science, new monsters outside of the core cast, and something went wrong, judging by the broken machine in his lab. There are also the blueprints, which can be read as strange symbols or poor handwriting, the former leading people to connect them to Gaster, while the latter may imply Alphys' involvement. Perhaps both. But from this idea stem the popular headcanon that Gaster is Sans and Papyrus' father, and rarely, their brother. There's not a lot of proof of this in-game, so this is really more fans filling in gaps in their backstories and having fun with their fan concepts. Some people even view Sans and Papyrus more as fragments from when Gaster shattered. Ultimately, it's all up in the air, with no hard confirmations within Undertale or Deltarune just yet. It is a pretty harmless headcanon, though, and I feel that people are way too harsh when they criticize it, considering that, at the end of the day, fans are just having fun. Plus, there is this concept image from Toby. With names censored, that may suggest some familial tie to Gaster or some other character we did not meet. However, until we get hard confirmation, this is still merely fanon. That being said, there is one larger issue I take when it comes to Gaster discussion and speculation, as it comes at the expense of another character. The determination experiments. There are those who believe that Gaster was involved in the determination experiments, and was the main guy behind them too. Too often I see people attribute Alphys' work to Gaster, or even Sans, from Flowey to the discovery of DT itself. Often I see the following reasons cited. Several of the lab reports use proper grammar, and others do not. This has led people to believe that two different people wrote the lab reports, but this simply is not true. Note how the first few lab reports match up with Alphys' monologue at the end of True Lab. Alphys was the one who discovered DT, who worked with human souls, who created Flowey and the Amalgamates. True Lab is about her struggles and her mistakes, but poor punctuation can easily be justified as her writing under stress and putting less effort into her work. It's consistent with the report about MTT's body making her sweaty, too. But what about the determination extractor? Alphys mentions using blueprints to pinpoint determination in the first place. And since Sans' lab has the most apparent blueprints in the game, surely that means Gaster is involved, right? Well, no. While they could be the same blueprints from Sans' lab, she could have had a hand in writing them, as previously mentioned. After all, messy handwriting did come up in the flavor text. And even in the event that they were based on Gaster's work, that doesn't mean that Alphys' work should be discredited, and that she didn't do her own research separate from this. Ultimately, I think shifting the bulk of the responsibility to Gaster undercuts her agency, and there are already so many fanworks that prioritize Gaster over Alphys and make him the important science guy, rather than the character who is a part of the game's central cast. I may cover this more in depth in an Alphys-centered video, so let me know if you want to see something like that in the future. Closing thoughts and interesting observations. While this isn't specifically about fanon, I thought I'd end the video with some interesting observations. First, there is Gaster's connection with phones. In the follow-up rooms, the phone does not function. In Mysteryman's room, no one picks up. Oddly, this is not the case with Goner. The phone connection has a lot of interesting implications, though. First, we have the wrong number song, which inquires about a G, possibly Gaster. Then we have the memory heads, whose act interface is oddly based on the game's menu, and who are only able to speak and act upon after you use your cell phone. Add that to their freaky attack text, their weirdly skeletal features, and their attacks resembling the Mystery Man's face, and a connection could exist. And of course there's the garbage noise in Deltarune, and Spamton's connection to said garbage noise, plus the mysterious Eggman. All this to say, there are many mysteries about Gaster that remain unsolved, and a lot of unique angles for fans to pursue in their content and speculation. I hope that by watching this video, you found new ideas, or at least feel a little more informed. If you like what I do, please consider giving a like, subscribing for more, and leaving a comment, as that all helps fight the algorithm. I do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi if you wish to support the work I do and help me create more content full time. And I also have an Undertale webcomic called Inverted Fate with some video and interactive elements too. Links to all of these will be provided on screen and in the description. However, I'd like to discuss a more serious matter before we go. You see, over the holidays, our household had a bit of an emergency. Our plumbing stopped working, our tub and sink started filling with disgusting water, and we had to call a plumbing company that could work as fast as possible, otherwise our household could not stay afloat. Unfortunately, said company overcharged us and is now expecting thousands more than the initial quote they gave us. Because of this, we had to open a GoFundMe in case we end up having to pay the full amount. I will put the link on screen and in the description as well. We have thankfully made a great start in raising the money we need, but we have a long way to go, and this ordeal has put a tremendous strain on both of our finances and my mother's mental health. So even if you can't donate, it'd be awesome if you could share the link around. I'll post a link to a Twitter thread in the description as well as the pinned comment for those who just want a signal boost. Anyway, thank you for watching, and here's to a better 2022.